The rain had not yet dried from the Lagos tarmac when Funke lifted the tray onto her head.
Your hot bread, Ewa
Her hands
Agoyin.
trembled, not from the weight, but from the cold morning air slicing through her worn cardigan. She steadied the tray of agege bread with one palm and gripped the handle of her cooler of Ewa Agoyin with the other. Steam rose from the beans, curling into the gray dawn like a small, stubborn hope. Bread,
Buy your
hot bread,
Ewa
Ewa
Agoyin.
Agoyin, sweet and fresh, she called out, her voice cutting through the honking Danfo buses and the shuffle of early workers heading toward Marina. She had barely rounded the corner onto the street when she heard it. A voice familiar, sharp, and cruel. Funke!
Is that really
Funke
you?
Adeyemi? Is that you? Her stomach dropped. She turned slowly, and there they were. 3 of her old university course mates, dressed in crisp office wear, phones already lifted, already recording. See her! One of them, BC, shrieked with laughter. The girl that used to come first in economics class, selling bread for GT Bank workers now? 4 years in university, another added, shaking her head in mock pity. Just to hawk bread and beans by the roadside? Haba. Funk's throat tightened. She forced her lips into something that resembled a smile, though her eyes burned. Everybody has to survive, she said quietly, adjusting the tray. There's no shame in honest work. Shameka? BC scoffed, stepping closer, phone still recording. Madam First Class, come and hear word. You should be shame. You should have married a rich man since. Instead, you'd carry bread for head. The small crowd gathering at the bus stop chuckled. Some looked away, embarrassed for her. Others simply watched, the way people watch a small accident, unable to look away. Funk's hands shook so badly the cooler nearly slipped from her grip. She steadied it, blinked hard, and forced her legs to keep moving. Excuse me, she whispered, pushing past them. BC's laughter followed her down the street, sharp as broken glass. Upload am, make people see level she done fall reach. By the time Funk reached the corner outside GT Bank's Marina branch, her cheeks were wet, though she told herself it was only sweat. She did not know it yet, but by the time she returned home that evening, that video, 31 seconds of her walking away with her head bowed, would already have 11,000 views. Her life was about to change, but not in the way anyone watching that video could have imagined. Before we continue, if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button on Modernstory Vault right now. This journey is only just beginning, and you don't want to miss where it goes. Now, let's go back to where it all started. 3 years earlier, Funke Adeyemi had walked across a different stage entirely. The convocation ground of the University of Lagos.
Mama, we did it!
Gown
I am
billowing
so
in the
proud
afternoon
of you, my
breeze.
child.
Her mother screaming her name from the crowd like she'd just won an Olympic medal. Funke, my daughter, first class! Mama Adeyemi, a widow who had spent 15 years selling tomatoes and peppers at Mile 12 Market to raise her only child alone, wept without shame that day. She had sold her only gold necklace to pay for Funk's final semester fees. She had trekked instead of taking buses to save 50 naira here, 100 there. This is not just your degree, Mama had told her that evening, pressing Funke's hands between her rough, calloused palms. This is our family's victory. Poverty has ended in this house today. Funke had believed her. Everyone had believed her. She graduated with a first class in economics. She had letters of recommendation. She had confidence. She had dreams of working in a bank, of buying her mother a proper house, of never again watching her mother count coins under candlelight. She printed 50 copies of her CV that same week. By the 3rd month, she had sent out over 200 applications. We regret to inform you, unfortunately,
God,
the
please
position
let
has
this
been
be
filled.
the one.
Thank you for your interest, however. Each rejection landed like a small stone. Alone, they did not hurt much. But stone after stone, month after month, they built a wall. A wall between the girl who once believed in herself and the woman she was slowly becoming. By the end of the 1st year, Funk stopped counting rejections. By the 2nd year, she stopped hoping for replies at all. Her mother's cough started as something small, a tickle she waved away with a laugh. It's just the market dust, Mama insisted. But the cough grew heavier. Nights became long and sleepless, filled with the sound of Mama struggling to breathe. The little money Funk had saved from selling recharge cards on the roadside disappeared into hospital bills, drugs, and endless tests. Madam, then the landlord I don't want to be wicked, he said one Saturday morning, standing at their doorstep with his hands on his hips, but rent has been owing for 4 months now. Please, understand my own side too. The following week, NEPA disconnected their electricity. Funk sat in the darkness that night, her mother coughing softly on the mattress beside her, and for the first time since her father's death, she allowed herself to cry without holding back. Her aunties did not help matters. Just marry,
Funke,
Auntie Bimbo told her over the phone.
hunting.
You're wasting your
Marry
youth on this, your
Chibobina,
certificate.
and take care of
Chief
your mother.
Adisa has been asking of you. He's ready to take care of you and your mother. I don't love him, Auntie. Love? Auntie Bimbo laughed bitterly. Love cannot pay hospital bills, my dear. Wake up. Funke said nothing. She hung up the phone and sat by her mother's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall in uneven rhythm. I will not give up, she whispered to herself. Not like this. Not after everything you sacrificed for me, Mama. She did not yet know what path she would take. She only knew she would not take the one everyone else wanted for her. The idea came to her from Iya Ramat, an elderly woman who sold Ewa Agoyin outside the local mosque.
Please sell me 500
My
naira,
daughter,
Ewa. Oyinbo,
why are
my
you sitting at
daughter.
home wasting
Plenty
away?
sauce.
The old woman asked one afternoon, ladling beans onto a plate for a customer. You have hands. You have legs. Come, let me teach you how to prepare this food. It is honest work. Nobody will die from selling food. Funk hesitated. The thought of hawking on the street, after everything, after her degree, after her mother's pride, felt like defeat. But that night, watching her mother struggle to swallow even a spoon of pop, something in Funke shifted. Pride does not pay hospital bills, she thought, echoing her auntie's words, though she hated to admit it. The next morning, she borrowed 8,000 naira from a childhood friend and returned to Iya Ramat's stall. Teach me, she said simply. Please? For 2 weeks, Funke woke before 4 a.m., learning to boil the beans until soft, blend the pepper and onions to the right thickness, fry it slowly until the aroma filled the entire street. She learned which bread sellers gave the freshest agegi loaves, which customers liked their beans extra spicy, which ones preferred it mild. On her first morning selling alone, her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the tray twice before she even left the house. What if somebody sees me? She whispered to her reflection in the cracked mirror. What if they laugh? She thought of her mother's cough. She thought of the rent. She lifted the tray anyway. The first few days were the hardest. People walked past without looking at her. A man once told her, "This work is not for people like you, Abeg. Go and sit down." A woman from her old church took one look at her and quickly crossed to the other side of the road, pretending not to recognize her. Funke wanted to disappear into the earth each time, but every night she counted her small profit, 500 naira, 700 naira, sometimes barely 300, and reminded herself that it was more than she'd had the week before. One day at a time, she whispered to herself each morning as she balanced the tray, one customer at a time. It was on her 9th morning that she met the man who would change everything. He stood tall by the GT Bank entrance in his security uniform, arms crossed, watching the street with quiet, careful eyes. When Funk approached, hesitant as always, he was the first person that week to look directly at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her, and smile. Good morning, he said. Is this beans fresh?
Is this bread fresh?
Yes, sir.
Is
Made this morning, Funk answered, surprised by the warmth in his voice. Give me 1 plate, with bread. And don't call me sir, he added with a small laugh. My name is Samuel. Funk, she replied, managing a small smile of her own, her first real one in weeks. He paid without haggling, thanked her, and walked back to his post. It seemed like such a small thing. But to Funke, who had spent 9 days being ignored, mocked, or pitied, it felt like the first kind thing anyone had done for her in months. The next morning, Samuel was there again. 1 plate, extra pepper today, he said, grinning. By the end of the first week, he had become her most loyal customer, arriving every single morning, rain or shine, always paying in full, always with a kind word. You know, he told her one Thursday morning, as she dished out his beans, the pepper today tastes different. Sweeter. I added a little sugar, Funk admitted, surprised he'd noticed. My old teacher taught me the trick. Whoever taught you, Samuel said, tasting a spoonful right there on the street, closing his eyes briefly. She taught you well. This is better than what my mother used to make, and don't tell her I said that. Funk laughed, a real, full laugh, the kind she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. Don't worry, she said, your secret is safe. We're just getting into this story, and it only gets more emotional from here. If you haven't already, tap that subscribe button on Modernstory Vault so you don't miss a single moment. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and let's continue. Samuel did more than buy breakfast. He began recommending Funk's food to his colleagues inside the bank. There's a young lady outside selling the sweetest Ewa Agoyin, he told the tellers during their break. Better than anything on this street, I'm telling you. Slowly, a few staff members began trickling out to try her food.
Good morning.
First two,
Can I get
then
you some
five,
fresh breakfast?
then a small
Hello,
line
what
formed
do you
each
have
morning
available
before the
today?
bank even opened its doors. Word spread among nearby offices too. A food vendor with a shop front just 2 streets away for once had real competition. Funke began preparing larger batches. She started arriving earlier, leaving later. For the first time in years, she went to bed not from exhaustion of grief, but from the exhaustion of genuine, hopeful work. Mama, she said one evening, counting a stack of notes on their small table. More money than she'd made in a single day since she started. We made 4,000 naira today. Her mother, propped up against a pillow, managed a weak but proud smile. Didn't I tell you? Hard work never disappoints a person who refuses to give up. Funk squeezed her mother's hand. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope, carefully, quietly, the way one holds a candle flame against the wind.
I am so
But Lagos
proud
has
of
a way
you.
of testing
You have
hope
done very
just
well
when it
today.
begins to grow.
Thank you, Mama.
3 weeks later,
Tomorrow will be
Funke
even
attended
better.
her university's alumni reunion, an event she almost skipped. But her old roommate, one of the few classmates who had remained kind to her, had begged her to come. Just for an hour, Funke. It will be good for you to see everyone. She arrived in her best outfit, a simple green gown she'd kept since graduation, feeling a small flicker of the old confidence return. It didn't last long. Funke! Someone called out. And there was Bissy again, this time flanked by a group of other classmates, some in bank uniforms, others in corporate wear that screamed of oil company salaries. So this is the famous Funke, a young man said, smirking. I heard you sell beans outside GT Bank now. Somebody sent me the video. Very popular for the wrong reasons, Abi. Laughter rippled through the small group. So, your economics degree, Bissy added, arms folded, now translates into selling beans by the roadside? Wonderful use of 4 years and your mother's hard-earned money. Funk felt her chest tighten, the familiar sting of humiliation rising to her throat. She thought about turning around, walking straight out. But something in her, perhaps the same stubbornness that had carried her through months of rejection, made her lift her chin. At least I'm not begging anyone for a job, she said quietly, evenly. At least I'm feeding myself and my mother with my own 2 hands. Can all of you say the same thing about how you got where you are? The group fell silent. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Bissy's smirk faltered, just slightly, but she recovered quickly with a scoff and turned away, pulling the others with her. Funk did not stay long after that. She left the venue with her hands trembling, tears threatening the entire taxi ride home. When she reached the bank the following morning, red-eyed and exhausted, Samuel noticed immediately. What happened? He
They
asked
laughed at
gently,
me, Samuel.
setting down
They
his
said I am
plate
just a bread
untouched.
seller. At the whole
She told him
reunion, they
everything.
treated me like I
The
was
mockery,
nothing.
the
It is
laughter,
okay, Funke.
the video that still circulated among her old classmates like a cruel joke that refused to die. Samuel listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening slightly as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Funk, listen to me, he said finally. A title can open a door, but it is character that keeps you standing inside the room. Those people laughing at you. Do you know how many of them are drowning in loans just to maintain the appearance of success? You are building something real with your own hands. Don't you dare let anyone make you feel small for that. Funk looked up at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. Why do you care so much? She asked softly. Samuel hesitated, then shrugged, a small smile returning to his face. Maybe because somebody once told me the same thing, on a day I needed to hear it most. That day, passing it forward. Something between them shifted. Quiet, unspoken, but undeniably real. Word of Funke's food eventually reached Mrs. Okafor, the branch manager, a sharp, no-nonsense woman known throughout the bank for her exacting standards.
What do you have available today?
She had heard her staff raving about the bread and beans girl for weeks, and finally decided to see what the fuss was about. "Give me a plate," she told Funke one morning, studying her with the careful eyes of someone used to judging character quickly. Funke, nervous under the manager's gaze, served her portion with extra care. Mrs. Okafor took a bite, chewed slowly, and Funke's heart nearly stopped waiting for her reaction. Mrs. Okafor said finally, nodding. "This is very good indeed. Who taught you this recipe?" "An elderly woman, ma, Ewa Ramat," Funke answered. "Well, she taught you well." Mrs. Okafor wiped her mouth with a napkin, studying Funke a moment longer. "We have a staff training seminar coming up next week. 50 people. Can you handle catering breakfast for that?" Funke's breath caught in her throat. "Yes, ma, absolutely, ma." "Good. Come and see my secretary this afternoon to discuss details." Mrs. Okafor turned to leave, then paused. "And Funke, whatever people say about you, keep doing what you're doing. I built this branch from nothing too. Nobody remembers the mockery once you succeed." Funke stood rooted to the spot, long after Mrs. Okafor disappeared into the building, tears of disbelief slipping down her cheeks. Samuel, watching from his post nearby, walked over and gently patted her shoulder. "See? I told you," he said, smiling. "Your hands are building something nobody can laugh away." The seminar catering was a resounding success. Orders poured in after that. Birthday parties, office meetings, even a wedding introduction ceremony.
Welcome.
Funke hired 2 young women from her neighborhood to help her keep up with demand.
Ready to start,
For the first time since graduation, she began saving money. Real money. Enough to move her mother to a small but proper 2-bedroom apartment with steady electricity. Through all of it, Samuel remained a constant presence, helping her carry supplies before his shifts, walking her partway home some evenings, always encouraging, always steady. Their friendship deepened into something neither of them dared name at first. They shared long conversations about their dreams, Samuel's hope of one day joining the police force to protect people the way nobody protected my own family growing up, and Funke's dream of opening a proper restaurant someday. "You'll do it," Samuel told her one evening as they sat outside the bank after closing hours, the street finally quiet. "I have no doubt." "And you'll become the most honest police officer Lagos has ever seen," Funke teased. "Somebody has to be," he said, and they both laughed, the sound settling comfortably between them like something familiar and warm. Neither spoke of the growing feelings between them, but everyone around them, the other bank staff, Ewa Ramat, even Funke's mother, who had met Samuel briefly during a hospital visit, seemed to notice what the two of them refused to acknowledge aloud. "That security guard likes you," Mama told Funke one night, a knowing
Funke,
smile on her face.
A security guard is
"And unless my old eyes deceive me,
but I love him
you like him
truly.
too." "Mama!"
He respects
Funke
me.
protested, though her cheeks warmed. "I'm only saying what I see," her mother said with a soft laugh. "A woman knows these things." But not everyone celebrated Funke's rising success. Down the street, a woman named Kemi, who had run a modest food stall for nearly a decade, watched with growing bitterness as customers who once bought from her now walked straight past to Funke's tray instead. Every day, it's Funke this, Funke that," Kemi muttered to her assistant one afternoon, watching a line of bank staff form near Funke's spot.
"Good morning. What can I
Since
get for
when
you
did a
today?"
jobless graduate turn overnight
Perfect.
into
I will note that
competition for
down.
people who have been doing this work for years? "Maybe you should ask her to teach you her recipe," her assistant joked, not realizing the venom simmering beneath Kemi's expression. "Teach me," Kemi scoffed. "No, I will find my own way to deal with this." She began spreading small rumors that Funke's food wasn't properly hygienic, that she used expired ingredients to cut costs. Most people ignored the gossip, having tasted Funke's food themselves and knowing better. But the seed of resentment had been planted, quietly waiting for an opportunity to grow into something worse. This story is about to take a turn none of you will see coming. Before we go further, make sure you've subscribed to Modern Story Vault, and if this story has touched you so far, drop a like. It truly helps this channel grow. Now back to Funke. It was a Friday evening, heavy with the kind of rain that turns Lagos streets into small rivers. When Funke's life changed, she was packing up her tray, exhausted from a long day, when her foot caught against something soft near the bank's entrance. She bent down, expecting a discarded polythene bag, and instead found a designer handbag, half hidden beneath a parked car, soaked from the rain. She glanced around. The street was nearly empty, most people having rushed home ahead of the downpour. No one had seen her find it. Her hands trembled as she opened the bag, initially only searching for identification to return it. Instead, she found something that made her breath catch entirely. Stacks of cash, more than she'd ever seen in her life, jewelry glinting even in the dim evening light, an international passport, a folder of signed contracts, and tucked at the bottom, several blank checks already signed, waiting only for an amount to be written in. Funke's heart pounded so violently she could hear it in her ears. She thought immediately of her mother's unpaid hospital bills, of the surgery the doctor had recommended weeks ago that they still could not afford, of the years of humiliation, the mockery, the endless nights of hunger. "Nobody saw me find this," a small voice whispered inside her. Nobody would ever know. She stood frozen in the rain, the bag clutched tightly against her chest, torn between the woman she had always tried to be and the desperation gnawing at her from every direction. Minutes passed. The rain soaked through her clothes entirely. Still, she did not move. Finally, gripping the bag so tightly her knuckles whitened, she turned and walked. Not home, but straight toward the bank's security post, where Samuel was just finishing his shift. "Samuel!" she called out, her voice shaking. He turned, saw her drenched and trembling, and rushed toward her immediately. "Funke, what happened? Are you all right?" Wordlessly, she held out the bag. "I found this," she said, her voice breaking. "Just now, near the entrance. Samuel, I don't know what to do." Samuel opened the bag carefully and his eyes widened at the contents. "This is a lot of money, Funke," he said quietly, looking up at her. "Do you know whose it is?" "No," she whispered. "Nobody saw me. I could have—" She stopped herself, unable to finish the thought aloud, ashamed even to admit it. Samuel studied her for a long moment, understanding exactly what she meant and what it must have cost her not to walk away with it. "But you didn't," he said softly. "You brought it to me instead. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, Funke." He gently took the bag from her trembling hands. "Come. Let's report this immediately before it gets any later." Inside the bank, the emergency was already unfolding. A wealthy businesswoman named Mrs. Adeniki Coker had returned frantically to the branch, having realized she'd left her handbag behind after a meeting earlier that day. Security footage was already being reviewed when Samuel walked in, Funke close behind him, the bag held out before them. "Madam," Samuel
Where is my
said,
handbag?
addressing the visibly
I had
distressed
it.
woman.
Everything was inside
"I believe
it.
this belongs to
We
you."
will find it, Ma.
Mrs. Coker turned, saw the bag, and let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp of relief. She rushed forward, hands shaking as she checked inside, the cash, the jewelry, the documents, all exactly as she'd left them. "Nothing is missing," she breathed, disbelief written across her face. "Nothing at all." She looked up sharply. "Where did you find this? Who found this?" "She did," Samuel said, gesturing to Funke, who stood quietly by the door, suddenly aware of every eye in the room now turned toward her. "You?" Mrs. Coker approached her slowly. "My dear, do you understand what was inside that bag? There is enough cash in there to change someone's entire life, and you brought it back, untouched?" Funke's voice was barely above a whisper. "It wasn't mine to keep, Ma." Mrs. Coker stared at her for a long moment, tears welling in her eyes, before she pulled Funke into a tight, unexpected embrace. "Do you know how rare this is?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. "In this Lagos, in this world, my dear, you have no idea what you've just shown me." Mrs. Okafor, who had rushed down upon hearing the commotion, stood watching the scene unfold with quiet pride. This is the same girl I told you about, she told her colleagues. The bread and beans girl. I always knew there was something special about her. By the following morning, the story had exploded across social media. Bread seller returns millions. Found outside GT Bank, refuses reward, read one headline. Another local blog titled it, The Most Honest Woman in Lagos? Comments flooded in, thousands of them, from strangers moved by her integrity, many recognizing her from the earlier cruel video that had mocked her weeks before. Isn't this the same girl they were laughing at for selling bread? One comment read. See her now. God is Television crews arrived outside the bank within days, eager to interview the honest bread seller, as the internet had now nicknamed her. Funke, overwhelmed and initially reluctant, agreed to a short interview only after Mrs. Okafor and Samuel both encouraged her.
Funke,
Why did you return it?
tell us.
The interviewer asked her, cameras rolling.
Called the honest bread seller?
Especially given your own financial struggles? Funke considered the question carefully before answering. Because my mother taught me that whatever you gain through dishonesty will never truly belong to you, she said simply. I have been through hard times. Very hard times. But I would rather struggle with a clean conscience than live comfortably with a guilty one. The clip went viral within hours. Business at her tray tripled overnight. Customers came not just from the bank, but from across Lagos, eager to taste the food of the honest bread seller for themselves. Some of the very same former classmates who had mocked her weeks earlier now sent messages, some congratulating her, others conveniently pretending the mockery had never happened at all. Funke read Bissy's message. A hastily typed, "Wow, so proud of you, Funke, always knew you'd make it," and simply set her phone aside without responding. Some circles, she realized, were not worth returning to. We're heading into the final stretch of this story now, and trust me, it's about to get even more emotional. If you're enjoying this journey, smash that like button. Leave a comment telling me what you think will happen next, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to Modern Story Vault so you never miss a story like this again. Now let's continue. It was on a quiet Sunday evening, weeks after the story had begun to settle, that Samuel finally found the courage to say what had been sitting unspoken between them for months. They sat outside Funke's small apartment, the evening breeze gentle against the noise of the city beyond. "Funke," he began, his voice unusually nervous for a man who dealt with far greater pressures daily. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." She turned to him, curious, her heart already beginning to race. "From the very first morning I bought food from your tray," he continued, "I saw something in you that I don't think even you saw in yourself back then. Strength, dignity, a kind of quiet courage that doesn't shout but doesn't break either. I watched you get mocked and still show up the next day. I watched you find more money than either of us will probably ever hold in our hands at once and still choose to give it back. Funke, I am not a rich man. I may never own a big house or drive an expensive car, but I know what I feel, and I have felt it for a long time now. I love you. I have loved you for a while." Funke's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling in her lap. "Samuel, you don't have to answer now," he added quickly, suddenly unsure. "I just needed you to know." "I don't need time," Funke said softly, reaching for his hand. "I've known for a while too, Samuel. I was only afraid to say it first." They sat together in comfortable silence after that, hands intertwined, the weight of unspoken feelings finally lifted between them. Not everyone welcomed the news with joy. "A security guard, Funke?" Auntie Bimbo exclaimed over the phone days later, once word had reached the extended family. "After everything, after your certificate, after everything your mother sacrificed, you want to marry a security guard? What will people say?" "People will say whatever they want to say, Auntie," Funke replied evenly, her voice steadier now than it had ever been during those old, difficult years. "They said plenty when I was selling bread too. I have stopped living my life for their approval." Her mother, however, upon meeting Samuel properly for a longer conversation, held his hands warmly and said only, "A man's job title does not determine the size of his heart. I have watched how you treat my daughter since the day she told me your name. That is all that matters to me." Even so, a few relatives remained cold, whispering their disapproval at family gatherings, questioning why a first-class graduate would settle for just a security man. Funke had grown used to disregarding such voices by now. She held Samuel's hand a little tighter each time she heard them, a silent reminder to herself of exactly what and who truly mattered. What neither Funk nor Samuel knew was that their story had touched more people than they realized, including the very executives at GT Bank's headquarters who had heard of the incident through Mrs. Okafor's glowing report. This is exactly the kind of story that reflects the values this institution wants to be known for, one senior executive remarked during a meeting. Integrity, honesty, community impact. I think we should do something for this young woman and the young man who stood by her. What began as a small suggestion quickly grew into something far larger. Staff members, moved by the story, began contributing personally. Mrs. Coker, the businesswoman whose bag had been returned, insisted on funding a significant portion herself. Mrs. Okafor took charge of coordinating the details, working closely and secretly with Funk's mother and a few of Samuel's colleagues to plan something neither of the two young lovers could have anticipated. "We tell them nothing," Mrs. Okafor instructed the small planning committee firmly. "Let it be a complete surprise." Weeks later, Samuel received a message from his branch supervisor. A mandatory staff appreciation event, all security personnel required to attend, formal wear expected. Around the same time, Funk received a separate call from Mrs. Okafor's office, requesting she cater a special corporate event that same afternoon, full payment upfront, an unusually generous sum for what she assumed would be a modest gathering. Neither suspected a thing. Funk arrived at the grand event hall that afternoon, dressed in her best outfit, trays of food carefully arranged, expecting to serve quietly from the back as she'd done for countless bank functions before. She was surprised by the elaborate decorations, gold and white draping, fresh flowers, a string quartet setting up in the corner. "This is a big appreciation event," she murmured to her assistant, adjusting a tray of small chops. Across the hall, Samuel arrived in a borrowed suit, slightly uncomfortable in the unfamiliar formality, wondering why an ordinary staff event required such extravagance. It was only when the lights dimmed and Mrs. Okafor took the microphone at the center of the hall that both of them began to realize something entirely different was unfolding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Okafor began, her voice carrying warmly across the room. "Today, we are not here for a staff appreciation event." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A crowd, Funk suddenly realized with growing shock, filled with familiar faces. Bank staff. Neighbors. Iya Ramat, beaming from the front row. Her mother dressed beautifully, tears already glistening in her eyes. "Today," Mrs. Okafor continued, "we are here to celebrate two remarkable young people whose story of honesty, resilience, and love has touched every single person in this room and thousands beyond it." Funk's tray nearly slipped from her hands. Across the hall, Samuel turned,
Please, I would
confusion
like to
and
invite
dawning
Funke
realization
and
crossing his
Samuel
face
to
simultaneously.
come to the very front of the hall.
"Samuel!" Mrs. Okafor called out, smiling. "Would you please come forward?" Trembling, he made his way toward the front, his eyes searching the crowd until they landed on Funk, equally stunned, equally frozen near her abandoned trays. "Funk, you too, my dear. Come." The crowd parted gently as she walked forward, disbelief written across her face until she stood beside Samuel at the center of the hall. "The two of you," Mrs. Okafor continued, her voice thick with emotion, "have taught this entire community something money cannot buy, the true meaning of integrity and dignity. So today, on behalf of everyone whose life you have touched, we are honored to give you both something you did not expect." The doors at the back of the hall opened, and Funk's breath caught entirely as she saw the truth unfold before her. An altar decorated in white and gold, a pastor waiting patiently beside it, and behind her, her mother stepping forward with tears streaming freely down her face. "Samuel," Funk whispered, turning to him, tears now falling openly. "Is this—" "I think," Samuel said, his own voice breaking with emotion, taking both her hands in his. "This is our wedding." Gasps and applause erupted through the hall. Mrs. Coker stepped forward, smiling through her own tears. "Everything is covered, my dear. The venue, the dress, the rings, even the honeymoon. Consider it a small thank you for showing an old woman that honesty still exists in this world." Funk turned to find her mother already beside her, gently helping to adjust a veil that had appeared seemingly from nowhere, whispering through her own tears. "I told you, my daughter. Hard work and honesty never go unrewarded. Never." Even BC and a few of her old classmates, who had somehow heard of the event and arrived uninvited but curious, stood at the back of the hall, watching in stunned silence, the mockery of months past replaced now with something that looked remarkably like shame, and perhaps, quietly, admiration. The ceremony that followed was simple, heartfelt, and utterly overwhelming. Samuel's voice shook as he repeated his vows. Funk could barely speak through her tears as she repeated hers. When the pastor finally pronounced them husband and wife, the hall erupted into applause so loud it seemed to shake the very windows. The girl they mocked for selling bread, someone in the crowd was overheard saying, just married the man who believed in her when nobody else would. We're almost at the end of this incredible journey, and I know many of you are as emotional as I am right now. If this story has moved you even a little, please subscribe to Modernstory Vault, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and hit that like button before we close things out. Now let's see where Funk and Samuel ended up, 1 year later. 1 year after that unforgettable wedding, Funk stood in the doorway of her very own restaurant, a modest but beautifully decorated space just 2 streets from the GT Bank branch where her story had first begun. A hand-painted sign above the entrance read simply, Ewa Agoyin's Kitchen, named in honor of the woman who had first taught her to cook with nothing but patience and kindness. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with activity. 6 young employees moved between tables, several of them, Funke had made sure, unemployed graduates just like she had once been. Young men and women who understood exactly what it meant to hold a certificate in one hand and desperation in the other. "Madam, table 4 is asking for extra pepper again," one of her employees, a young graduate named Chidin Ma, called out with a laugh. "Some things never change," Funke replied, smiling as she moved through the kitchen with practiced ease. Samuel arrived that evening still in uniform, though his shoulders now carried a new set of stripes.
Good evening,
a recent
Funke.
promotion within the bank's
Welcome
security
home,
division,
Samuel.
with whispers already circulating of his long-held dream to eventually join the police
How was
force
your day,
finally
Mrs.
within
Adewale?
reach. "How
It
was your
was
day,
good,
Mrs. Adewale?"
but it
he
is
asked,
better now.
using her married name with the same warmth as the very first morning he'd greeted her on the street. "Busy," Funk laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good busy." They sat together after closing, as they often did, reviewing the day's earnings, occasionally reminiscing about how far they'd come. "Do you remember?" Samuel said quietly, watching her count the day's takings. "When you told me you didn't know if you'd ever escape the shame you felt those first weeks selling bread on the street?" Funk smiled softly, glancing around the restaurant that now bore her mentor's name, filled with employees whose lives she had personally changed, built entirely from a tray she had once been too ashamed to lift. "I remember every single day of it," she said. "Every insult, every rejection, every night I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made the wrong decision walking away from job applications to sell food on the street instead. And now?" Samuel asked gently. Funk reached across the table, taking his hand in hers, the same steady hand that had believed in her long before the rest of the world had any reason to. "Now I understand," she said, "that the very thing they mocked me for became the foundation of everything I've built. Everything we've built." Beyond running the restaurant, Funk and Samuel had quietly begun something even more meaningful. A small scholarship fund, contributed to monthly from the restaurant's profits, dedicated to supporting struggling students who reminded Funke, in one way or another, of the young woman she had once been. 3 students already benefited from their first year of giving, their school fees fully covered, their futures a little less uncertain because 2 people who once had nothing had chosen never to forget where they came from. Ewa Agoyin, now retired from active trading but still a regular visitor to the restaurant that bore her name, often told anyone willing to listen, "That girl came to me with nothing but willing hands and a broken heart. Look at her now. This is what happens when a person refuses to let shame defeat them." On quiet evenings, when the restaurant had emptied and the city outside had settled into its familiar nighttime hum, Funk sometimes stood by the window, watching
The
the
very
street
thing
where
they
it had all
mocked me
begun.
for.
The very
became
spot
the
where she had once
foundation
been
of
mocked,
everything I've built.
filmed, and humiliated for simply trying to survive. She thought often of that morning, of the tray trembling in her hands, of the tears she had fought so hard to hold back. She thought of every person who had told her, in ways big and small, that she should be ashamed. She was not ashamed. Not anymore. Perhaps she never truly needed to be. Her story had traveled far beyond that single street, beyond that single video that once threatened to define her. It had become, instead, a quiet reminder to thousands of strangers who had followed her journey online. A reminder that dignity is not found in the type of work a person does, but in the honesty and resilience with which they do it. As Funke often told the young graduates she now employed, whenever they arrived nervous, ashamed, or uncertain about starting over, never be ashamed of honest work, my dear. Titles may open doors, but it is character that builds a home. The hands that once carried bread through shame and mockery can one day carry blessings for many others. Trust the process. Trust yourself. And that brings us to the end of this incredible story. If Funke and Samuel's journey touched your heart the way it touched mine, please make sure you're subscribed to Modernstory Vault, drop a comment below sharing your favorite part of this story, and share it with someone who needs a reminder today that honest work and patience always pay off in the end. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.